I'm Sophia A Jackson, editor and founder of Afridiziak Theatre News, and today we are joined by...
I'm Ifeyinwa Frederick. I'm the writer of Sessions, and I'm also the co-founder of Chukwu's, the world's first Nigerian tapas restaurant.
Thank you very much for your time today. So, because Afridiziak Theatre News is all about theatre, I just wondered if you could share some of your earliest memories of going to the theatre.
So my first experiences of the theatre that I remember, I've got a very dodgy memory, are all Western musicals. I think the Kids Week programme is still running, and that used to allow people to buy one adult ticket, and then child would go for free, and then another child would go for half price. So we always used to go every summer during Kids Week and see quite a few shows. In particular, I really remember Starlight Express. I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but all I know is they were dancing on skates, and I was so impressed. And then I remember Cats, which I absolutely loved. And then much later on, I remember watching We Will Rock You, and I think We Will Rock You is one of the few musicals I saw multiple times.
Wow.
And it was, I genuinely think it was one of the best. Like I loved it. I was devastated when it left the Dominion.
Wow. So you're of Nigerian heritage, so have you experienced theatre in Nigeria as well?
So I'm half Nigerian, half Canadian, and I have actually been to theatre in Nigeria. I can't remember what the show was. I've completely forgotten it now, but I've only been once, unfortunately.
Yeah. So do you think were you always destined to go into theatre from childhood, or how did that come about?
Definitely not destined. Well, in the sense that it definitely wasn't my plan. I loved dance, so I loved theatre, watching shows. I personally used to dance, and I loved dance. Around 17, 18, I wanted to be a dancer, had my heart set on going to dance college. Then I found out you had to pay to audition for dance college, and I was like, okay, maybe not. And I feel really passionately about that, actually. Like, there are a number of choices I made. I loved arts and did want a career in the arts when I was growing up, but a lot of the choices I made were finance-based, and I said, no, actually, but what I didn't want was to struggle, and it felt like to be an artist was to struggle, and I didn't want to sign up for that. So then I was like, do you know what, I'll go to uni and study something else and go down a different path. If I still want to be a dancer afterwards, then I can look at that. Whilst I was at uni, again, I really liked the idea of like working in what I thought at the time was called like arts admin role. But then if I'm being quite frank, I would look at the like starting salaries, and I was like, And when you've got the law firms and accountancy firms and the banking firms coming down to the uni, you're just a bit like, oh, okay. And I think there's that, like, anyone who wasn't financially comfortable growing up, I think does have that in the back of their mind when they're making decisions, and you just think, I don't want that to continue. And so whilst I was at uni, I was involved in a few plays, which is when we first met, almost 10 years ago, when you interviewed me, when me and my friend were doing a production of The Coloured Girls. But at the time I'd never written, so I was acting. I then did a play in my final year about mental health, and I came up with the concept, but we got other people to write it. Because at the time I was convinced I couldn't write. Left uni, went away, I was living abroad, was teaching English, came back, started the restaurant. And then I was like, I was really missing using my creative juices. Like, by then I hadn't danced for about a year and a bit at all. So I started going back to the theatre when I could. And then I just thought, I really would have loved to have given writing a go, because it always stuck in my head that when we did the show about mental health at university, in some ways it felt like it'd been my idea, but it wasn't really my show in that sense, because I hadn't written the words, and I didn't really want to be in that position again. And I just thought, I'll give it a go. And the way the universe conspires to work for things that you put out there. And then I remember scrolling on Twitter, and then it was Yolanda Mercy had tweeted about some writing courses happening at Stratford. They were only a £5, which matters. Money matters. I think we need to talk about it in arts. And because they were only a £5, I was like, I can give that a go, like just for the evening. So I signed up for a couple. One was with Yolanda, one was with someone else, and then one was with Lynette Linton. And with the one with Lynette Linton, she got us doing a free writing exercise. And you know, when you're not in your regular space, so you actually just feel freer. So when she was like, oh, does anyone want to read it out what they've written? I was like, oh yeah, I will, like whatever. Do you know what I mean? I'm just here for the lols.
Yeah.
And then people like laughed when I read out, and I was like, oh, quite funny. So maybe I'm and then we were chatting about the idea after. She was like, oh, it's quite an interesting idea what you're exploring, like talking about having women talking about sex in that way. And she challenged us all to finish the scene.
Okay.
And I'm very much that sort of person. If you tell me to do something, I'll do it. And then after that evening, I just messaged her being like, oh, do you know, I really appreciated the course last night. I really felt like, you know, maybe I could write one day. And she said, oh, why don't you apply for Soho Writers Lab? Now, I had actually seen the Writers Lab before when I'd been thinking about writing events, but I thought that you had to be a writer to sign up for the lab, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it completely passed me by. But I looked at the lab, I saw again that they had bursaries, money matters.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I can afford to give that a go. Because for me, it was just meant to be something for fun, and it really had to be like affordable, because by now we're starting the restaurants. I'm on like a startup salary, which isn't really anything at all. Yeah. And so I finished the scene from the free writing exercise, sent that into Soho Writers Lab, got onto the lab. Whilst I was on the lab, I developed a script, which then became The Hose. And then fortunately, someone from the theatre passed that script on to Ikenna at Independent, who is now my agent. And it was when Ikenna asked to sign me that I was like, oh. So up until that point, I was just doing the lab and was going back to the restaurant. It was always something that I was doing for fun. And it was a conversation with Ikenna, and like him really playing out to me like what he thought I could do, that made me realize, oh, I could actually have a career in this. And so, fun fact, the lines that I wrote in the free writing exercise with Lynette were still the very opening lines of those that went on to stage at Hampton.
That's incredible. I was going to ask about the Soho Writers Lab experience, actually. Yeah, how was that?
Brilliant. I love it. I'm gonna say now, it maybe it sounds biased because my next play, or the current play, is going to be at Soho Theatre, but even more that, I like have so much love for that experience. I recommend it to anyone who's considering trying to write a play. It's just because of the hand-holding you get. It's quite overwhelming. Like even now, when I start something fresh, I'm like, God, flip, how did I do this when I get to the end? On the lab, we had the 3 deadlines. So the first one was write a scene, which feels like doable. You're like, oh, I can finish a scene. Then you get notes, and then it's finish your first draft, then you get notes, and then it's finish another draft, I think it is. And then you get notes, and maybe there's one more draft or something like that. But basically you've got these like 3 deadlines to hit that I think like helps you space out and think about what you're doing so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And a lot of the activities that we did in the session, in particular going from first draft to second draft and second draft to final draft, I still use like ways of interrogating your characters, ways at helping you flip the ideas around. So with sessions, at one point I was stuck on the relationship between Tunde and his dad. And I remember I had some in my notes about like writing a diary entry from your characters, like what would they say? And so I was like, okay, let me try that actually. And then that really helped unlock something. So for me, it wasn't so much just about this finished script that I got as well, but it was also some of the exercises and the ways of thinking. And I think something else that I saw is being in a group with a bunch of people who all had such different styles. I also think made me really comfortable in accepting that my work might be different to someone else's, because I saw from, actually, like someone would often write in a different form, or someone might write in this way, or like this kind of thing. And you're like, oh, there's like so many different ways to create a show or to write. So that's fine. Let me just do my way. Like it wasn't like we were all carbon cutouts of the same thing. And so I absolutely appreciated the lab. I think it's great. Like, I'm really happy to still see that it's still going, and I think they're getting like a growing number of bursaries as well, as like more and more people that go through the lab, I think go back to try and support it so that others can go through it. So yeah, I am a big fan. If you're watching this and you're thinking about doing it, you might as well apply it. You've got nothing to lose.
That's perfect. Thank you.
And they didn't pay me to say that.
Honestly, no money has crossed hands here. So can you summarize your latest project, Sessions, like how it came about and what it's about in your own words?
Oh gosh, do you know, it's so weird you've asked me that and I've just got a bit emotional. Sessions is an exploration of therapy and depression through the lens of a Black man, and it's really looking at the universal challenge of being vulnerable and open up, but especially taking an extra look at masculinity. For me, it came from a couple of places. One particular frustration I had was that I felt that portrayals of therapy would never really prepare anyone for what the actual therapy experience is. And it's often made or talked about, even not even just in the media, talked about in quite a simplistic manner, as if you go, you'll get therapy, and then bish bash bosh, you'll come out the other end. And I think anyone who's ever gone through the therapy process, entering with that mindset is such a I'm trying to not use an expletive. It makes the actual experience more difficult, because you're not necessarily prepared for how much work it is. And at the same time, whilst I am happy to see over the last 10 years people are talking more about mental health, I personally get quite frustrated when the conversation seems to stop at like, like talk to someone, just like reach out. I think that doesn't really tackle why it might be difficult for someone to reach out in the first place, and how difficult that can be. And also, I think for someone who is maybe reaching out but still struggling, it can make that person feel like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I've got the support around me. But there's still this window where you can be reaching out, where you can be going to therapy, but things can still be difficult. It's very messy. And I think that when there are conversations about mental health challenges, rather, not just mental health, I don't think we're really looking at the complexity of the matter. And so that's what I want to do with Sessions. It's not like a neat, clean play. I don't have the answers, but I think I just wanted to portray how complex it can be, the fact that it's not necessarily just one thing that triggers someone. My therapist said to me that sometimes we end up in a point of crisis because of the 1,000 cuts we've experienced that we've never spoken about. And I think that's a very real thing for a lot of people. At the same time, because I mean, I could have written that story and chosen any character. There could have been an Asian woman, an old white man, but I was also very aware from the men around me, and also just looking at society, that there is a real problem. You can just look at male suicide rates. There is a real problem with young men talking. And in particular, I just don't think we have enough examples or representations of Black men being vulnerable. And I don't think they're often given the space to be vulnerable. And so it was very important to me. I mean, the story, to be honest, if anyone watches it, doesn't really change if you changed the race of the character. But for me, it was very important that anyone coming to see that story, talking about therapy, talking about vulnerability, I saw a Black man doing that. I think I felt that was just really important. And so that's where it came from.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, what was the reason for not choosing to highlight Black women and mental health? I was just wondering. But
it was more really that I wanted to focus on a Black man, as opposed to I didn't want to write about a Black woman, and maybe also in some distancing potentially from myself, that on a subconscious level, so it's not like, oh, it's just my story on stage. But I think there also was a very I think the story might have taken a slightly different journey. And whilst I'm not in any way saying Black women don't struggle with the same things, they very much do, I do think it is more acceptable for Black women, at least amongst themselves, to be having those conversations. So it's not that we don't have those difficulties, I think we do, but I think there's something about that silence and that real struggle to talk that is more, I think anyone going through something feels it, but I think almost just from a societal level, like if I started crying on the bus now, if I was on a bus, I feel like people would be like, oh, she's crying. But if someone saw a big Black man like Joseph, who plays Tunde, breaking down on the bus crying, I think everyone is getting very uncomfortable because they're like, what's going on? And some people are going to respond in a very like in particular quite toxic manner. And that was something that I wanted to unpick, like when you add that layer, how does that also affect like what's going on there?
Yeah, I was wondering how the play is being received, because it opened, was it the end of September? So are Black men coming to see the show?
It's been touring, it's been on tour at the moment. And there have been some Black men in the audience. I think there can be more. It's something I'm really big on. Every time I post about it, I say to someone, don't just book your ticket, tell someone else and tell a Black man or a man in general as well. Because I really want people to see the show, because I trust in my work, and I really believe that if people see the show, there will be conversations that follow. And actually, one of the most heartwarming moments for me was when I went to see the show up in Doncaster, which is the furthest north I've ever been. And I remember I was really tired that day, and I was really quite nervous about seeing it. I was like, oh, I don't know how people respond to it. And the audience was quite small. And I was like, and then like they laughed and it seemed to have gone well. And then at the end, I was talking to a few people, and I got talking to this one Nigerian family, and the dad from the family said that, actually, that he said the show has given him a lot to think about. And he mentioned that he's got an 11-year-old son who cries a lot. And he normally responds by being like, why are you crying? Like, essentially man up. This isn't okay. And he said watching the play had made him confront the fact that actually the way he's dealing with his child's tears at the moment is likely to cause problems later on down the line. And he's like, it just made him think about the expectations that he's putting on his child, because his child's a son, and actually he knows that he treats if it was a daughter, he would treat them differently. It basically had his head whirring, and he said, he thinks he needs to go away and think about that, because he doesn't want to recreate the sorts of situations that we see unfold in the play. And for me, honestly, that was like, as a writer, I personally think that's all you can ask for. Like, you can get all the amazing reviews in XYZ, but actually you want your story to connect and have an impact on people. And if now this little boy is going to have a healthier relationship to his emotions because his dad came to watch my play, and that ripple effect will be tremendous, how it affects all his relationships that he goes on to. Maybe that will be one less person that we lose to male suicide. Do you know what I mean? For me, that was like an absolute win. I was made up. Anything else that happens after this, now I'm like, okay, I've touched one person.
So are you having post-show discussions? Because obviously if they're dealing with this subject matter, then what if they don't have an outlet for possible emotions that might have reared?
Yeah, so after each show, there's an announcement which explains where people can access more resources. And there's been we had a lot of conversations about that between Plaintown and Soho Theatre. And even when it's been going through the process, the play it's a big play. And so we had a drama therapist on board with us as well to support everyone going through the process. But there are also some Q&A events being scheduled for the run at Soho Theatre as well.
Yeah, I think that would be really powerful and useful as well. It's good that you do the announcement though. as well.
Yeah, I think it's needed. But it is funny. Like it's
Okay.
I have to say that because I think it's really easy to hear the topic and think, oh God, that sounds heavy. But
Yeah.
I'm really big on people not going into theatre and being just way down on for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like I just think humour is necessary. As someone who's had experiences of depression and anxiety for almost a decade, I laugh a lot in my worst times. And there's this kind of myth that it's all sadness. I mean, it's definitely sadness, but like the dark humour that comes out from that. And so yeah, I personally feel like if I'm representing this topic properly, there would be a lot of humour in that. That's just life. The worst moments kind of generate this weird dark humour, because this is what we do to get by.
What I did want to touch upon, because one of the subject matters is that the lead character, he's turning 30, isn't he? And what is it about turning 30 that so many of us struggle with, do you think?
Society. Because it's just an age. It's like it's the whole thing is the construct. It's absolutely ridiculous. I genuinely think it's just I think it's the self stuff. Essentially, it's where it came about. Like the ages that we've got as significant markers, I think, has come from consumerism, so that you'll go big on those days. Right. But now it's been heralded as this like the age of which you're supposed to have achieved, don't know what, like, oh, found the right partner, got your house, which is just ridiculous in today's world. Got nailed where you are meant to be in your career. And I don't really know where the idea comes from when you think about how long we live these days. Like 30 is very young. And I mean, I'm very fortunate because I've got 2 older siblings, and I saw my sister turn 30, and she had a number of friends who are older than her, who are now even approaching 40, and they're living their best lives. So I've always, you know what, it's if while someone else is worrying about 30, like 30 plus, 40 looks fantastic. And my parents are 60, and I'm like, yo, the 60s, they look great. And I do think it's actually part of some of what we've got is also, I think basically the world could benefit from more intergenerational conversations. Because I think if you spoke to someone who is older, you'd recognize just how much they didn't have. Because often what people will say is like, oh, you know, by the time my parents were this age, they had the kids, they had this, they had that. Yeah, life was different, but also maybe they wouldn't have traveled as much. Maybe they were still unsure about X. Or like maybe for some people's parents, they then split up and then they actually met their person after. Do you know? It's like when comparing it, if it was a science experiment, it absolutely doesn't work because there's way too many variables. I actually think if we spoke to our own parents at 30, there are a lot of things that they still weren't happy with in their lives. And you see it a lot, especially, for example, like with women when they get into like past that age, and they'll talk about how they're stepping into themselves now. Like it's just an absolute fabrication. But we live in an age where it's the age that everyone's talking about it, and then everyone wants to fixate on it. You've got all the 30 under 30 lists. And then the way people will go big on it and then talk about all the things they've done. And it is a brilliant thing that people do celebrate their achievements out loud. But I think we're in a place where people very rarely talk about the other side. And that creates a lot of distortion. So you're comparing, what's it people say? Like you're comparing your worst bits with someone else's best bits, and then just feeling really rubbish about yourself.
Yeah, but also when it's online, it's their edited best bits as well. So it's not the reality of what's going on in their lives, and that's the other thing to put into context as well. So why should people come and see the show?
Because it's very funny. It is. People should come and see sessions because I think it will lead to a really open-hearted conversation with whoever they come to see it with, and even if that's just themselves, I think it will encourage them to think a little bit deeper about a particular topic that I think is really important. And it is a heartwarming show. Okay,
thank you. How are you juggling running a restaurant and a production? How's that going? You want to tell us about your restaurant?
Yes, so I mentioned earlier, I'm the co-founder of Chukwu's. It's the world's first Nigerian tapas restaurant, and we exist to celebrate the best of Nigerian cuisine and culture. I run it with my brother, and we started it as a pop-up. I think it's coming on to, I'm actually even starting to lose count now. We started as a pop-up, I think 5 years ago or 6 years ago now, coming up to 6 years. And then we in our first permanent place after a 4-year site hunt in Tottenham. We opened
4 years.
Sorry?
Say 4 years.
Yeah, we were looking for a site.
Oh wow.
It was like a 4-year process, really. Yeah, we opened our first permanent site in Tottenham last year, February 2020, 1 month before the lockdown. So we have been existing in Corona times only. That's all we've ever really known is the pandemic. So yeah, it's been a really, really challenging 18 months to 2 years, even without the writing, just navigating the restaurant through that. But we've done some excellent things. We launched nationwide delivery of our dining experience kits. And I think on the one hand, I guess the closure and the lockdowns gave me some time to read more, arguably more time to rewrite scripts. Yeah. But actually for last year, I couldn't write. I just had an absolute block. I really, really struggled last year to write anything. And then I found myself writing again this year a lot more. Things were just flowing. And I think actually what I didn't realize, there was just a lot of stress and anxiety because of what was happening. Which was just affecting my like brain capacity and creative capacity. This year it's been a lesson for me in letting go. I haven't been able to be in the rehearsal. I wasn't able to be in the rehearsal process as much as I would have liked to have been because I needed to be at the restaurant. And I just think that's why it's really important to have a team around you that you trust. And I completely trust Philip Morris, who's the director. And that was a thing when we were looking at directors. And I said to him, he said, "Oh, what are you looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for someone who I believe is going to honour my vision when I'm not there and is going to tell me the truth about what's really going on in rehearsals when I'm not there." But I'm also supported on the restaurant side by a brilliant team and also my brother, who is my co-founder, and he very much respects what I do in the writing. And at no point on this journey have I ever been made to feel like I'm having to choose between the two. And so, for example, when it was previews, he knew that I was going to be off for previews. And it's always like, okay, so well, how's it going and everything like that, and giving me the space to be that. But yeah, a big thing I think this time around was I had to accept that because of where things were with the lockdowns and reopening, there was an element of the play process that I was going to have to take a bit of a step back from. But I think that's actually good for my growth in terms of letting me trust other people. But it's been tough. I'm not even going to pretend. It's hard running a restaurant. It's hard writing. Doing the two is ridiculously hard. And I exercise quite a bit to cope into it. Like, exercise for me is a really important thing. Helping shut my brain down, helping me stay stable. A lot of exercise, a lot of quiet time with myself when I'm not working. That helps me through.
Yeah, and I guess it helps with your own mental health as well, if you're getting those endorphins from your exercise. I'm pretty sure that this morning I saw on Who's for Dinner blog that Chuck's London has an honest burger for Black History Month. Is that right? Yeah,
so we Honest Burger do monthly, I think it's they do monthly specials across the group. And we were approached to do one. So we released the Nigeria burger at the start of October, and that runs until the 1st of November. And that was really exciting collaboration to kind of bring the Nigerian flavors to a wide audience. So it's got Fanta candy bacon, and anyone that's had Nigerian Fanta will completely understand like what that means. There's plantain crisp in there, there's jollof sauce in there. And there's a chicken spicy mayo, which is centered around our Afridiziak sauce, and it's absolutely delicious. I went with my mum to try it the other day, and she was like, "A burger?" She's not even into burgers. Then she had it. She's like, "No." She's like, "This is good."
Okay, you've sold it. I need to try it before October is out. Going back to Sessions, which, as we said, is currently on tour and it will also be at Soho Theatre. How did you choose the other locations?
So that was a conversation between Payne's Plough and their touring partners. So the show is a co-production, co-commission between Soho Theatre and Payne's Plough, and Payne's Plough have a number of venues that they tour to that they take shows to. And yeah, that was kind of an ongoing conversation with them based on where the venues were at. So for example, when we went to Brighton, Brighton actually only, so we went to the Old Market in Brighton, and they had only just reopened, just about like 2 weeks before the show had begun. So the tour dates and locations we went to shifted as different venues responded to the pandemic.
Okay, that's quite interesting seeing that unfold. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about Sessions before we go?
The only thing I'd want to say is, if you've already seen it, tell someone else to come and see it. If you think you want to see it, book your ticket and tell someone else to come and see it. And even if you think you maybe don't want to see it or you can't see it, tell someone else to go and see it. I'd love to see Black men in the audience. I'd love to see people having these sorts of conversations about opening up therapy and mental health challenges. And I want this to be normalized. I don't want to be the only play like this going on for time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.